Okay, for this video we're going to be looking at what we would use the trig ratios for. We're going to start getting into solving trig problems. So in the last video you learned about what the ratios are, the three of them, sine, cosine, and tangent, what they mean, how to set them up in a triangle. Now we're going to start using them, which is the next step in setting up those problems. So we're going to be looking at how to evaluate the ratios and then what inverse ratios are. So recall that SOHCAHTOA is the way that we remember how the trig functions relate to the parts of a triangle. And it might be easier to write it like this. Okay, and you could remember SOHCAHTOA, or you could remember some old hippie came hopping through our apartment. That works as well, as long as you're remembering how the letters relate. So sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. Okay, opposite in relation to the angle that you're talking about. Cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, again in relation to the angle you're talking about. And then tangent is the opposite side over the adjacent side. Now, something to remember, and this wasn't talked about, I don't believe, in the last video. When we have trig problems, in fact, I know it wasn't talked about in the last video, because in the last video, you were setting up ratios and you had all of the sides. When we do these problems, since this is the first step in setting up your trig problems, your trig equations that we're going to get to, you will have one angle and two sides. And you must have a right triangle. Now, if you don't have a right triangle, you can't use the trig that we're talking about. You will have one angle. Typically, we put an X there, or maybe this symbol here, which is called a theta. Okay, sometimes that's used to represent it. And then you'll have two sides. It can be any two. And remember, if that's my angle, my opposite one is over on the other side. Adjacent is touching it, and the hypotenuse is the one that the right angle is pointing to. Okay, we always base off the angle that we have. Okay, and like I said, you'll only be given one and then two sides in a problem. Okay, when we're evaluating trig ratios, what this really means, and you guys are going to have a calculator that does the work, but used to, when we didn't have calculators, way back in the day, they had a table that they looked at, because every angle measure, okay, has a trig ratio value, and it's the same trig ratio value no matter what triangle we're talking about. Now again, it has to be a right triangle. Okay, but if I'm talking about 63 degrees and I want to do sine of 63, whatever that is going to be the same in this triangle as it is in this triangle if both of those angles are 63 degrees. Okay, so really what I'm getting at is the value, what we're figuring out, the values we're going to get today, they're going to be the same for any triangle. So I'm not actually going to give you any triangles to look at in your homework. Your homework's just going to be given an angle. You need to evaluate it. Because, like I said, every angle measure, doesn't matter what triangle we have, has the same trig ratio. Okay, and we use our calculators to evaluate that. Now, something important, okay, is that you need a scientific calculator. Calculator that you have, the basic calculator that you get when you look at the calculator on your phone does not have your trig functions on it. If you turn it sideways, it does. Okay, but you need to have a scientific calculator that has the sine, cosine, and tangent buttons on it. Okay, it may also, depending on the calculator you have a trig button that you look for. Okay, and it just would be labeled trig, and you usually have to hit that, and then these pop up. Okay. The other thing that you have to remember is that your calculator must be in degree mode. Okay, now this is a topic that I'm not going to dive too deep into, but there are other modes that your calculator can have for trig. Okay, if you go on beyond Algebra 2, typically we don't talk about trig until beyond Algebra 2. If you go and take a class beyond Algebra 2, you'll learn that other way to count and calculate triangles. It's called radians. For that, we don't want to be in that mode. Our mode for what we're doing in this class is the degree mode. Okay, so what I would recommend right now is you get your calculator out, pause the video, get your calculator out, look at your calculator and find the sine, cosine, tangent buttons, and then the degree, make the mode button, make sure it's in degree mode. If your calculator's brand new, it's probably already in degree mode. If you haven't messed with it ever, changed anything, explored the buttons on it, it's probably in degree mode, so you don't have to worry about it. And you will notice as we go through our problems if it's not in degree mode, because you're going to get different answers than I am. If it's not in degree mode, you're going to get every question wrong on the homework. Okay? If it's not, if you can't find the mode button or you can't find the trig buttons, what I would do is I would Google it. Okay? Feel free to send me an email too if you need to, if you can't find it on Google. But I don't have a list of everybody's calculators. Everybody could have a different one. So if you Google the type of calculator that you have and say change mode or where are my trig buttons, okay, it should pop up someplace in there where those things are or how to change them. Now, if you can't find it, can't Google it, let me know, send me an email, tell me the type of your calculator that you have, and I'll guide you from there. Okay? Really, though, today, very easy because the calculator is going to do all the work for you. The rest of our notes here are going to fly. They're going to be really quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate the trig ratio here, and we need to round it to 4 decimal places. Okay? So we have sine 59. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the sine button in my calculator. Typically, it opens a set of parentheses, and then I'm going to put 59 in there. Okay? I have a graphing calculator. Mine's a little fancier than what some of you are going to have, but they all do the same thing. So find that trig button, find sine, put in 59. I checked my calculator to make sure that it was in degree mode already. So this is the answer that it gives me. 0.857167300. That was a bad 7. Okay. If you didn't get that, your calculator's in the wrong mode. Or you used the wrong trig function. Make sure you use sine. Okay? And we need to round this to 4 decimal places. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to look at this number that's bigger than 5. So my answer to this would be 0.8572. And that's it. I'm done. That's all I want you to do on these problems. I'm going to do cosine this time. So I'm going to find my cosine button. It's cosine of 13, and I get 0.97437. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to look at that fifth number. It's bigger than 5, so 0.9744. And there's my answer. I have to round that 3 up. Next one, tangent 38. Find the tangent button. Put in 38. I get 0.78128. I'm going to look at that 8. It is bigger than 5, so I'm going to round up on that 2 and make it a 3. And there's my answer. That part is that easy. Okay? I don't want you to overthink it. Your calculator is going to do the work for you. Alright, just make sure that you are in degree mode. Because if you're not, every one of these is going to be wrong. Now we're going to switch a little different. And instead of, here, well, let me go back a second. This number that we're finding here is equivalent, since we're talking about tangent, the O over the A in the triangle. Okay? And like I said, every right triangle, if it has that 38 degrees, is going to have the same one of these ratios. Doesn't matter the size, the measures, they all work out to this value here. So what we found is the fraction part. We've just made it into a decimal. And that's important to remember because now as we switch gears, well, what if I didn't give you the angle? What if I gave you the ratio? What if I gave you the fraction or that decimal that we just came up with? Well, what we would have to do is work backward. Okay, and to figure out the angle, we use the inverse trig functions. Okay, so really at the end of this, you're going to have 6 trig functions. You're going to have sine, cosine, and tangent. Then you're going to have inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. Now, most of the time on your calculator, you have to hit second, and it is the button of the trig function. That's how it is on my graphing calculator. If you have the trig button, all 6 are listed in that same place. You just have to push over to get to them. Okay? So now I want you to take a minute, pause the video, and find these buttons. Okay? here's our examples, okay, on what to do here. So it says determine the angle measure round to the nearest whole number. So we are looking for what we would plug in on the ones we did before this. I've given you the fraction here. To do this in our calculator, I'm going to use the -1 button. So I do the inverse sine, or second sine, to get that function, and then I plug in the decimal that it gave me. So I'm going to go second sine to get the inverse sine function, put 0.2571 in my calculator, and I get 14.89 and a bunch of other numbers. I want to round to the whole number, so I'm going to look at that 8. That 8 is bigger than 5, so then my answer is 15. And to check it, I could do sine 15, and it should be awfully close to that. Now I rounded it because it was really 14.89 something something. So 15 is going to be close to it. It's not, might not be exact, but it's going to be close. I do the same thing here with my cosine. I'm looking for the angle that I could plug in, so I do inverse cosine, I'm working backward, and I plug in that decimal. So second cosine on my calculator, you may hit Trig and then scroll left to right to find these. Second cosine, put in 0.6729, and I get 47.7. Okay, well that 7 there is bigger than 5, so I'm going to round this to a whole number. I'm going to round it to 48. There's my answer. To check it, I could put cosine 48 in my calculator, and I should get something awfully darn close to that. Okay. Now last one here, tangent. So I'm going to use the inverse of tangent. Plug in my decimal, 1.9345. I get 62.66. I'm going to look at that 6. It's again bigger than 5. All of our examples here are rounded up. They don't all do that. If it's less than 5, the number stays the same. Okay, so this rounds up to 63. So I would put in 63 there. And that's it. Really today, what I want you to do, make sure you do, realize, is that the calculator is doing the work for you. Okay? I have a random set of examples here. What I would do is pause the video right now and you try these on your own, and then unpause it and check your answers, because I'm going to go through them really quick, and me just telling you what the answers are isn't going to have you practice it. So pause the video, you guys practice it, put them in your calculator, see if you can figure them out, and then check them. So sine 81 is 0.9877. Tangent 17 is 0.3057. I'm going to skip down here and I'm going to do this one because these three are all the same type. I don't have to use inverse function. So I'm going to skip down and do cosine of 29, and I get 0.8746. Okay, now these I have to use inverses on because I'm looking for that angle. So I'm going to do cosine with the -1 of 0.1943. I'm going to round to the whole number, which is 79. Next one, sine, inverse sine, 0.3799, and I get 22. And the last one here, inverse tangent, because again I'm looking for that angle, of 5.8106, and I get 80. Okay, so there's your extra examples. Hopefully you got them all right. A little bit of a recap here. Make sure you use the correct buttons, the correct trig function. If I use cosine instead of sine, obviously I'm going to get the wrong answer. And that you're in the correct mode. Make sure it's in degree mode. Okay, Google it if you need to figure out how to change it to degree mode. My recommendation today is not to overthink it. Let the calculator do the work for you. But you need to make sure that it's set up correctly in the first place, because if it's not, you're going to get every question wrong. If it's in that wrong mode, you're sunk. Okay? Good luck on your Schoology assignment. It's fairly straightforward. It's just like the examples we did. If you have any questions, please post them in the discussion board or shoot me an email.